Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. And the reason you're here is because there's nothing on the telly. And I'm coming to you live from the Old Hill Manor. And I'm your host, Lord Hill. So tonight I've got a cracking. I've got a couple of guests on tonight. A couple of fantastic guests. So you know what this is about? On a On a Tuesday, I have a live stream quiz that the Duchess, the Ladyship, she compiles and I deliver, and that's over on the Live Awesome Quiz channel. But this is all about mental health, mental well-being, and taking the stigma out of it. So tonight, my guests are going to be talking about self-doubt and self-care. So, without too much of ado, what I'll do is I'm just going to bring in my first guest. So, Katherine. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. How are you today?
I am doing well.
Brilliant. Whereabouts are you?
I am based on the East Coast of the US in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, gone with the wind country.
Mm, yeah.
So, Katherine, um, your expertise is in self-doubt. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to doing what you do?
Sure. My name is Katherine Winch, and as I said, I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I am the author of a self help personal empowerment book called Slay Like a Mother. And I wrote this book because for 20 years of my life, from age 15 to 35, I lived with an extraordinary amount of self doubt inside of me. And no matter what I achieved on the outside, I never felt good enough on the inside. And I was always hustling and running and chasing and desperately trying to be loved on the outside because I didn't love myself enough on the inside. So went through many years of therapy, self-help books, Oprah episodes, a bottle of red wine or two, and I learned to love myself from the inside so that I no longer required it from the outside. And I wrote "Slay Like a Mother" to help other people slay their dragons of self-doubt, like I did.
Wow. So that's how you got into it in the first place.
Yeah, that was the spark. I healed myself. And once I had done that, I really felt selfish, kind of keeping these, secrets to myself of how you could learn to love yourself from the inside. And at the same time, I was starting my company, which I run now. It's called the Mom Complex. And at the Mom Complex, we conduct research with women and mothers all around the world. And through my research, I realized that the number one emotion, in this case for mothers, the number one emotion we all have in common is self doubt. This deep seated belief that we're not good enough, thin enough, nice enough, tough enough, mom enough, wife enough, daughter enough, all the things. And so when I uncovered that research, all those women in my research study felt like I felt. We felt like we weren't good enough. And that was very freeing for me because I thought, wait, if we're all broken, if we're all suffering, then maybe we could talk about it instead of pretending like we're not and just smiling and nodding and saying everything's fine when it's not fine. And so, yeah, that's how it got started from personal experience. But that's the beauty of my book, Slay Like a Mother. It really weaves in research from men and women and mothers all around the world to prove to people that you're not alone in your mental health struggles. And a lot of people are struggling.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I've seen quite a bit of is that people doubt themselves, and then that becomes infested, and then they just go down a little spiral, and it just takes a little bit of a nudge from somebody else to get them on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I think this world is tough on people. Kids are tough
Yeah,
and teenagers are tough and jobs are tough and marriages are tough. And I think as a society, we don't do emotions well and we don't grieve well. And there's a lot of shame around, mental health and struggling. And so there's just millions of people all around the world that continue to not just struggle, but to suffer and to do that in silence. And so I
yeah,
love what you're doing is let's just talk about it and let's talk about our struggles. And it really is a wonderful medicine, and everyone is struggling with something. Everyone is.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
acknowledge it.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It is if we can make it an everyday conversation, a normal conversation around about mental health, mental well-being, and let people know that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to talk about how you're feeling, talk about your issues, and then the other side of it is if you are feeling a bit rough and you ask somebody for help, or you're that person that somebody's come to and asked for help, make sure you've got the time just to listen.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's all it takes is for somebody to use these ears twice as much as they use the cake hole, and and that way you can just help somebody just by listening. Sometimes that will get somebody through some dark times, and I think you
Yeah,
must have found that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I also like this notion that you're saying of, we have to give voice to it. We have to talk about it. So, one activity I hear people doing is some people call it their peak and their pit. Some people it's their rose and their thorn. But it's when you share the best and worst part of your day. You can do this with your children. If you have children, you can do it at work. What was the best and worst part of your day today? And what that does is it teaches us to give voice to the bad parts of our day, especially for
Mm,
children and teenagers, or even in a relationship to say the worst part of the day was XYZ. It allows us to give voice to the hard parts of our life without it being dramatic, without it being a big deal. It's almost like we get practice saying it out loud. So I think that's a neat activity to do.
mm. And I think it's important as well. I mean, kids nowadays, you have to feel sorry for them. There's so many pressures on, whereas we didn't have quite so many pressures. I certainly didn't when I was a young lad. Life was totally different back then. It was rough, and when the area I grew up, it was pretty rough. They taught us how to fight before we could walk, just to go out on the streets, because you go out on the streets, you get a thump, and you just learn how to deal with it, and stand up for yourself. Kids
No, you're
nowadays, there's so much bullying goes on at schools and on the
Oh, it's
internet.
terrible. And social
Yeah,
media, I mean, it's absolutely, they are living their own life and then all their rejections and everything else in their life is, exposed and on display and under the spotlight and the comparisons, young girls just
yeah,
looking at other girls, and it's really exhausting when I have two teenagers, and when I see their telephones, it
yeah,
wears me out. It's like so.
yeah. So, Catherine, um, if you'd stick around, I'm going to introduce the other guest, and then we'll have a chat with her, and then we'll come back and we'll have a conversation all together. So,
Perfect.
thank you, Catherine. Well, I think we've got we've got a really good conversation for tonight when Katherine comes back in. So let's bring on my next guest. So, Charlie. Welcome to the Hill Manor.
Hiya, how you doing?
We're doing all right. Have you
Good.
listened to the conversation so far?
Yeah, fascinating. Catherine's got some valid points, and I couldn't agree more about being a teenager in the social
Yeah.
media the way it is today. I wouldn't want to go through it again.
No, me neither. So, Charlie, can you give us a little bit of an heads up on what you do and your angle of self-care?
Yeah, so I am a paramedic, and I've been working frontline for an ambulance trust in the south of England for approximately 10 years. I was fairly late to it in life. It's been the most rewarding job that I've had to date. It has its challenges, and as such, I see a lot of mental health patients and people in mental health crisis, and also have to deal with it a lot myself because of the nature of the job itself. Um, I found some coping mechanisms which are healthy, one of which is my newfound passion for motorbikes.
Well, we'll come on to those coping strategies because, as you know, I'm a bit of a motorcyclist myself. I've had a motorbike for probably, I don't know, best part of getting on for sort of 55 years. I've had a motorbike pretty much all the time. There's a few odd little bits where I've got rid of them, job taking us away. But yeah, I've had motorbikes nearly all my life. I had my first one at the age of 12.
You see, I'm much later in life, so I hit the
Mm,
grand old age of 50 last year and decided I was going to put myself through my motorbike license, which I did. And since then, I've basically not stopped. So I think I'm on bike number 3 now. And I've just come back from a 2-week tour of France. I'm off to Scotland for the second time. Within 6 months, I had already done a solo tour up to Scotland and back. I love camping and going to all the events and local shows and tinkering with my bike, which is basically where I've been today. So I still have the oil to show for it.
terrific. So the ambulance service then, what's their strategy on looking after their staff's mental well-being? Because I mean, it's a stressful job. B, you see an awful lot of trauma, and I guess the culmination of day in day out seeing horrific things must have a bit of an effect.
So the ambulance service does put its staff first and foremost. Obviously, our patients as well. But if we can't care for ourselves, then we're no use to anyone else. So we do attend a lot of very traumatic, a lot of very difficult incidences. It's a very rewarding job. You're there at sometimes what can be the worst time in a family's history and in their lives. You can also be there at the best times when they're welcoming a new life into the world, for example. Um,
Mm,
and it's from my perspective, and this is all from me on my personal opinion as a paramedic and how I found it. For my own mental health, it's not the one-off big incidences that we go to that stay with you. Sure, there are a few, but luckily we don't attend that many huge traumatic events in our careers, which is good. So it's more the kind of the build up, and 10 years of frontline. If you're going through death, which you see on a daily basis, heartbreak, the whole thing. If you're doing that on a daily basis for 10 years, it starts to wear you down. And that's where I think the problem lays. It's not the one-off events, it's the accumulation over time. The ambulance service, as I say, they're very good at putting staff first. if you do go to an event which is deemed as being traumatic for whatever reason, there is an immediate, what we call a hot debrief afterwards. So the staff who attended are all gathered together. We have a quick kind of, how did it go? Could we have done anything differently? You know, how do we feel about this? What could we do next time? That's done almost immediately after the event. And then after that, sometimes there is what's called a cold debrief, where we involve other services. So it could be that fire have attended and police, and we get together with them as well. So we have like a tri-service debrief. And that's actually a really good way of seeing other people's point of views and what may have affected them that may not have occurred to us at the time. After that, we have a what's called a TRIM, which is the Traumatic Incident Management session. So we have appointed staff within the trust who will then pick up with you, and that's usually done a few days to a week after the event to give time for things to settle down. Obviously, your emotions are running quite high when it first happens. So a few days later, a week later, they'll pick up with you and see if there's, you know, things that you're going over, you're still reliving, see how you're coping. And then ultimately, we've got something called the Staying Well service in the Ambulance Trust, which is there for ongoing help and care. They can offer counselling. They can point you in the direction of bereavement counselling if necessary. So the support structure is there. I have used it myself. It's very effective. And that's the way that we cope frontline. That and talking to each other. There's a lot of camaraderie between, as I'm sure there is in the military as well. But
I
basically,
guess a
there's a
bit of
lot
black
of
humour comes in
discussion.
as well.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's the only way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
We do have a very special sense of humour, but it is our way of coping, and not everybody understands it. But it's so important that we talk to each other, and that's what we do, because we can't
Yeah.
necessarily talk to people outside of work. They don't want to hear it,
That's
and they're
it.
not allowed to.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, from your point of view, then, the TRIM. I mean, TRIM has been with the military for a few years now, and it really came into its own. The Royal Marines were using it a long time ago, but the Army had picked it up during the Afghan campaign, and I'm a TRIM practitioner and a TRIM coordinator, or was, and I've seen it firsthand on the front line, and also I've seen it back in the UK when I was a welfare officer in London Central Garrison. We had an incident where one of the guys was out on a run. One of the guys collapsed on the run, and fortunately there was an ambulance close by, and the guys that were all involved in the incident, we trimmed sort of 72 hours after the incident. And then we did a follow-up at the 30-day point, and then we did another follow-up at the 3-month point, just to make sure that the guys were still okay, because this guy was pretty ill at the time. He did survive, but it was touch and go. And from that point of view, it doesn't have to be a battlefield injury or something like that. It's just a traumatic incident. And one of the things is that the emotions that people go through in the early stages, it's not unusual to have those sleepless nights. It's not unusual to relive it all, and that's perfectly normal. And we call it the Tom Jones scenario, where it's not unusual to have these things. So that's TRIM is proving to be a really good thing. And one of the things that they found from the Falklands War, the guys that came back on the aircraft that flew back straight after they took Stanley were suffering a lot more than the guys that were stuck on ships, come back, took 3 weeks to come back on the ships, because they were dealing with it, they decompressed and all the rest of it. And we're still getting veterans nowadays from the Falklands that are having issues from the Falklands. So that's my experience of TRIM.
I think that's a big part of it is not what is actually affecting you at the time when it happens. It is that build up. And it is the time afterwards when people go home, go back to their families, be it, after coming home from work, or whether or not it's, coming off tour. it's that time when things go back to normal for everyone
Yeah.
else. That's when things start to kind of perhaps rear their head as they're not quite normal for you anymore. And
Yeah.
it's identifying that and being able to say this isn't quite right,
Yeah.
and how you deal with that. Um, from my point of view as a paramedic, I'm pleased that there is a lot more awareness now,
Yeah.
for mental health and what can be done long term. It started off with veterans and PTSD, etc., but I think now I'm definitely seeing it more in the civilian society for people who have been through traumatic experiences, more so now than it used to be, even 10 years ago when I first started the job.
Yeah.
It's now acceptable or it's more acceptable for men to ask for help, whereas that just wasn't a thing 10 years ago.
No.
Um, I think we're leveling the playing field a bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. So should we bring Katherine back in and we can have a bit more of a chat? So boom, Katherine, you're back. You're muted. Yeah, you're muted. Why are you
Oh,
muted?
sorry.
There
Sorry
you go.
about that.
You muted yourself.
There we go. Yeah. I have to say that my big brother is a battalion chief in the fire department. So it's interesting to hear, the paramedic side
Yeah.
and what, the mental health issues and the challenges. It's a lot.
Yeah, I've spoken. In fact, I've had 4 firemen on one evening, and we were talking. One was from Germany, one was from the UK, one was from America, one was from Canada, and we were having that discussion about how they dealt with traumatic incidences, and the Germans seem to have it quite well swept up, and it's becoming a norm to talk about it now in the other countries. So it is getting out there. It is still a challenge. It's still foreseen a stigma around talking about stuff when you're not feeling right. But that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to let people know that they can talk about it. They can have that discussion. So there you go.
I think how people deal with it as a means of coping. So if the help's not immediately there and people don't feel that they can necessarily talk to their doctors or their family, then it should be that they can at least have one or two friends that they can just reach out to and not have that stigma. I feel
Yeah.
desperately sad for people that don't have that kind of close relationship where they can say, I'm not right, something's not
Mm.
right.
Sometimes it's just a stranger. There's quite
Mm,
often somebody will just open up one day to a perfect stranger, and as long as that
mm.
perfect stranger is quite able to sit and listen, doesn't have to pass judgment, doesn't have to give them anything, but just there to listen. Sometimes that's all they need.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think sometimes people we just don't have the words or the vocabulary because there's so few people talking about it. And so, somebody that's tired for months on end just thinks they're tired and they don't have any energy, but they might be depressed, or
Mm.
um, having a panic attack and just different things that um, are can be so concerning. But I think teenagers and anybody really like just don't have the vocabulary to say, oh, this is anxiety, oh, this is depression, oh, I'm grieving because I lost someone that I loved, because even grieving and death and dying, I mean, especially in the United States, you don't even talk about it like it didn't happen, you just stuff it
Yeah,
down.
that's a funny old thing, isn't it? Because if you take a bereavement, take somebody dying, everybody's going to die sooner or later. And it's been a funny old thing that people haven't been able to talk about it. But we have on this show.
It's a perfect
We've covered
example.
bereavement and we've covered suicide as well, because that has a massive impact on a whole family when somebody
Mm.
takes their own life. Um,
Mm.
So I think it's okay to let people know that they can have those conversations. It's okay to celebrate a life rather than mourn the loss. And I think if you
Yeah.
look at it that way, then it becomes easier to talk about the person that's died.
I think it's perhaps looking at our friends and asking the questions, of them. So, because different people experience stress and bereavement and grief, or anxiety in so many different ways, and it
Yeah,
doesn't all represent as somebody screaming and wailing. It can be that somebody is just distant, distracted. They're not coming out as often. They don't want to exercise. They start losing interest in their appearance. They're tired, they're sleeping all the time or not at all. And if we identify that in our friends and just have that, sometimes that's all it takes, is that, are you
yeah.
okay? And I know sometimes when people have said to me, are you okay, I'm like, that's all it takes.
And sometimes it takes a second ask. So the normal
Yeah,
reaction, somebody says to
the
you, "You okay?"
automatic is, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I'm
fine.
fine. And
Yeah, I'm
then
fine.
you
Yeah.
follow it up. Are you really okay? And that's when
Mm,
they can start opening up. But if you do that, make sure you've got the time to listen to them. The last
mm,
thing that you want to do is open that can of worms and say, "Oh, sorry, I've got to shoot off," and leave them in limbo.
mm,
Once they've opened up, that can make their situation slightly worse. So if you do
mm.
ask that second question, make sure you have got time to listen. And I think that's one thing that could be taken. If you do see a friend that is struggling, make sure you have got the time to listen to them if you're going to ask them if they're okay, if they're really okay, and they do start to open up. So
And
what's
I
your
highly
experience on
recommend
that?
coping mechanisms. I highly recommend coping mechanisms other than alcohol and cigarettes and drugs and whatever. I highly recommend getting out on two wheels.
Absolutely.
Don't take
Well,
your phone. Cut yourself off from literally everyone. Well, you can take your phone in case of emergencies, but
well, yeah.
don't have it turned on so it's in your helmet. Just put the phone in your pocket. And I can't think of any better way than just to, blow the cobwebs off, literally.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, normally the first point of call, if you're not feeling right, you go to your doctor. Now, I found doctors. I mean, I had a little wobble a couple of years back. I retired from the army in 2018, and then into lockdown. A couple of years after I'd left, I had a little wobble, and the first port of call, because I'd been well for, I knew what to do, so I went to see the doctor. First thing he did was offer me some pills. Well, I said, no, I don't want them. Because once you start on the antidepressants, it's a slippery slope. So he offered to some counselling. Now, the counsellors that I saw three different counsellors over about 6 or 7 sessions. They were good at what they did. Unfortunately, for me, they didn't understand my problem, what I've come through, what I've seen. Um, and what sorted me out in the end is I had a chat with a mate of mine, and we just sat. I mean, we've been involved in the same sort of stuff, um, and we just had a chat, and we put it right, and I'm okay. Now he's died. Silly sod fell off the roof, and he was up on the roof last year, washing off his solar panels, and he fell off the roof. It wasn't the fall that killed him; it was hitting the car and the pavement that killed him. If he had survived, he would have been in some serious trouble because it was his wife's car. Put a big dent in it. Um, but that's where the black humour comes from.
I have to say, I think you said about the slippery slope of antidepressants. I
Yeah,
honestly think they have their place, and I think it's a
yeah,
personal choice.
Yeah.
mm,
I think my pathology and physiology training and all the rest of me has taught me that there is a chemical imbalance. And personally, I'm not afraid to admit it. I have been on antidepressants for 20 years now. And I have no intention of coming off them. When I've tried, things go wrong. So it's working for me. I don't think
Mm.
it's a be all and end all, but I think if you get the right medication that helps you level, then it makes you able to deal with everything else. For
Mm.
me, it's the difference between looking at the world through water and not feeling like you're participating in it, like you're just an observer from the outside, and actually having that little bit of control back that enables you to then take steps to deal with yourself. I don't think, personally, I don't think I'd been able to do that without that chemical balance as well.
Mm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
that's
it's like you say, it's
that's
horses for courses, isn't it?
Mm.
Some people
I
it
mean,
will
yeah,
work
and
everyone's
for, others
different,
it won't.
and
yeah. I do see the same thing in my research in terms of for people that are on medication that it's life changing and it just reduces some of the struggle, not all of it, but it does help. And I think that there's a stigma around it that people don't ask for as much help there because
mm,
but like you're saying, it's a chemical imbalance. Like it should be fixed in the same way that you would take
yeah,
medication for anything that was
exactly.
all,
Mm.
physically in your body.
Mm.
But the stigma, I think, has a lot of people not, asking for it or requesting it. But if there was less stigma, you just have people, there might be people that really need it.
Mm. I
I think
think
there is a big culture at
antidepressants,
the moment.
yeah,
Sorry, go on.
say antidepressants have had a bad press for a lot of years. I mean, some of the antidepressants that they put people on are addictive and all the rest of it, and that's where the stigma comes into to using them. I think, but like you say,
I
there
think that
there are good ones
initially,
out there. Yeah.
when antidepressants were first launched many years ago, that's another thing that derived from not necessarily the military, but I think a lot of them derived from the prison service, and they actually used antidepressants as a means to suppressing some of the inmates and dulling
Mm.
their sort of feelings, so that they didn't cause them as much trouble. And then that's perhaps where some of that initial stigma came from. But things have moved on so much, and there are now
Yeah.
so many different options and varieties, and I don't think it's the be all and end all. I don't think it's the cure to take this magic pill and you'll feel happy. But as I say,
Mm.
if it helps just level things out so you can actually take back control yourself, then it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think finding something to do. I mean, quite often you go down that road of depression is because you haven't got anything to do. You go into that little bit of a spiral where you don't think you can do something, so you don't do it. You become isolated, you become lonely, you're going
Mm,
into yourself. And if you don't get out and do something, then you become a recluse. And I've seen it
mm.
quite a few times actually,
It is a very
particularly.
dangerous spiral, and it's
Yeah,
about breaking that.
absolutely. And I think getting out on your motorbike is a good way of doing it.
Yeah, until
Also,
Amen.
I
getting
fall
out on a
off.
boat. Yes. So, from your point of view, then, from the research that you've done, Catherine, what can you um, say is one of the best ways for people to move forward if they are feeling a bit off?
One thing that I talk a lot about in my book, Slay Like a Mother, is just combating the negative self talk that so many of us have, and the first step is recognizing how you speak to yourself, when nobody's listening. And you have to recognize it. And then I like to say that you can learn to teach the negative voice in your head some manners. You're never going to get it to completely go away, but you can teach it some manners. So in an example in my life, I was at a hotel gym not too long ago and had gotten up early and rode the exercise bike in the gym. And when I was done, I was stretching And I felt on my backside like 2 complete handfuls of cellulite, and I was very horrified. And so the negative voice in my head said, what must that look like? And I was looking around like, who can see my cellulite? And but the point is that, first of all, I heard it. I heard that negative voice say, what must that look like? And then I corrected it by saying, what this looks like is that I got myself out of bed and got on a bike. That's what this looks like. Like, I can choose to frame this as, good job, you got up and worked out. Do you have
Mm.
cellulite? Yes, it's not the end of the world. But just that little bit of course correction, it's a practice. In the beginning, you have to do it 50 times a day, but it does eventually quiet a lot. But I think there are practices that we can stop hating on ourselves so much.
Mm. I like that idea of taking a negative and spinning it to turn it into a positive. I think that's a great lesson for people to take away. Is if you have a negative thought, or just think a bit more and turn it into a positive. So
Yeah, and sometimes you might not even be able to make it positive. Like, sometimes we're so down on ourselves, but like, if you can at least neutralize it. Like, that example
yeah,
was, what must that look like an insult, and the response was, what it looks like is that you woke up early to exercise. Like, it was almost just stating the facts, because a lot of people will say that they don't have it in them about their weight or about their career or their marriage. They don't have it in them yet to say anything positive. So it can also just be neutral.
yeah, and I
I
and I
often
think
think, what does my 50-year-old backside look like on a motorbike? And then I think I don't care.
Right.
and the point is nobody else cares either. That's
No,
Exactly.
it's
That's
only
right.
what goes on in your own mind.
Yeah,
Other
they
that's
don't.
people
it.
don't look and say, "Oh, blimey, look, she's got a big bum."
No, no,
That's
People
no.
exactly.
don't
That's
care.
sad. That's what's so sad. It's like all this mental anguish that we cause ourselves. Physically, particularly women, I think, are more prone to that. But it's the anguish that we put ourselves through when no one else is thinking that at all.
Yeah,
People don't care.
that's it. People don't care what other people look like, what other people do, what other people
They're
say.
worried about themselves.
They put all that self doubt on themselves. No, nobody else does it, which I find quite amusing actually. You can beat yourself up to your heart's content, but at the end of the day, it's only you that's suffering, nobody else.
No, we're very good at self-deprecation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that can manifest itself into sort of a downward spiral. But if you take life on, grab it with both hands, keep your glass half full, you ain't going to go far wrong. Just try and give yourself the positive in life, and that's my philosophy. Always look on the bright side. Have half glass, half full or overflowing, and take the positive. Always, if there's an opportunity arises, grab it. Because the last thing you want to do is, when you die, turn out the pearly gates with regrets. The
They
last thing
say,
you
don't
want to
they? You
do,
don't regret the
yeah,
things in life that you do. You regret the things that you don't do.
that's it. And there's there's a few things that I've done that I kind of regretted doing, but on the whole, um,
Oh no, you see
opportunities
that you
come
just learn
along.
from those.
Yeah, that's just a way of learning. Don't do it again. I learned that lesson a long time ago. Got caught scrumping. I don't know if you know what scrumping is, but it's borrowing somebody's apples that don't belong to you. You go into an orchard and pinch a
Oh,
Oh,
few apples. Anyway, we got caught. Copper. Here, these yours. What you been up to, you little bugger? clout. Yeah, taught me don't get caught. So there you go. Well, ladies, I think we've had a pretty good chat this evening. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we disappear? Any words of
I
wisdom?
would just invite anybody who's looking to slay their dragon of self doubt. You can go to slaylikeamother.com and learn about the book and about your own self doubt if you're interested.
I'll put all that in the description so you can see where you can get the book and where you can get hold of Katherine for a chat. Charlie, anything?
My pearls of wisdom. Well, as a paramedic, if it's warm, sticky, and not yours, don't touch it. Other than that, yeah, get out and find a hobby.
Terrific. Well, thank you, ladies. You have been absolute stars. If you'd like to hang around, we'll have a quick wash up. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Wow, what a fascinating chat we've had this evening. Hope you found it really interesting. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button. If it's your first time here, don't feel free to subscribe to the channel and pop a comment in. So just like to thank those that have been watching. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having a chat. So until next week for the quiz on Tuesday and next Thursday, I'll have more guests on everyday conversations regarding mental health. So until then, TTFN, ta-ta for now.